There's a speech given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1991. 1991. This is a speech given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it was on Shabbat Mevorchim. Shabbat Mevorchim means the last Shabbat of the month of Tammuz, of the month of Sivan. And it was the last Shabbat in the month of Sivan, and it was blessing the coming month. Let me just have a look over here and see, is that really what's going on over here? 17th of Sivan. In 1 minute. No. Give me a second here. Oh, here we go. No, we're there. No. Okay, this coming Shabbat will not be Shabbat Mevorchim. Back then in 1991, it was. It was the last Shabbat of the month of Sivan. But our coming Shabbat will not be the last month. Will not be the last Shabbat. It'll be the Shabbat after that. Okay. Shabbat, Parshat Shalach. Dover Kamapamim, we have said many times, Orot, about Hachaluka, the divisions, the Kriyat Torah, reading the Torah, a Parshat HaShavua in the Torah portion of the week. She'av Shebakol Shabbat, even though on every Shabbat we read Parsha Achat, only one of the 53 Torah readings, the Torah, which is relevant to that time. I don't know, maybe not everybody knows this, but the Jews have been reading the Torah nonstop in public since it was given. Moses instituted that the Jewish people would read the Torah nonstop since it was given, which was 3,330 plus years ago, depending when you're listening to this. If you're listening to it now, it's 3,338 years ago. We've been reading the Torah in public nonstop since then. Actually, it was 3 times a week. 3 times a week. 3 times, 4, actually 4 times a week. Once every Shabbat, we read the whole entire Torah portion, and then on Mincha of Shabbat, the right before Shabbat ends, we read a little bit of that next week's Torah portion. And on Monday and on Thursday, we read that little bit again. We repeat it again. And then Shabbat, we read the whole portion. Okay. So Jewish people, so they finished the whole Torah. We finished the whole reading of the Torah from Bereshit until the last words of the Torah once a year. Once a year. That's on Simchat Torah. We finished the reading. We finish it once a year. So how does it divide it up every single week? Not just whatever you want to. It was divided up specifically. Everything the week to make it easier. There were some places they used to finish it once every 2 years, 3 years. Maimonides says, but we don't do that anymore. We read it finish once a year. Okay, so it's divided up into Torah portions. B'kol yom. So every Torah portion is not just arbitrary. The Torah portion relates a message which is relevant specifically to that week. In fact, many messages. B'kol yom, every day of that week that we learn that Torah portion, we read another part of it which is relevant to that day. Huh? So again, and I know we said this a lot of times, and I just finished saying it in the previous class, but God is creating the world all the time, and He's creating the world all the time in order that we should feel our responsibility to Him. And what's our responsibility to God? To use the world the way God wants us to. And that cleans the glasses, so to speak, so that we're able to see through the world and see the godliness, the purpose of the world. And for that end, God gave the Torah. The Torah is the instruction book to tell us what is our responsibility, what do we have to do, how do we have to do it, what's our attitude should be. And every week has a little bit of a different message. Never call part. So every single Torah portion is also divided to every single. It's divided up in a way that's relevant to each week. And in fact, it's even divided up so it's relevant to each day. But every little part of the Torah, every detail is connected to the Torah in general. It's all part of the Torah. The messages are very important, but you have to never forget that it's part of the Holy Torah that was given by God to Moses. So don't get too caught up in the messages, in the responsibilities, so you forget who we're responsible to God. So the Torah, the Torah is one big unit from Bereshit to Einei Yisrael, from the beginning of the Torah to the end. Shehi, that it is, like it says, Torah achat, it is one Torah. Kamo b'parsha achat, it's just like one big paragraph. Shekol chelik bo, that each word which is in it, or sentence, is attached, is connected to the whole entire paragraph in general. Gamudgash b'akriya, which that's stressed in the reading of the Torah on this Shabbat, on the Shabbat, is the general message of each day of the week. So what do we say? That each day of the week has a little 1/7 of the Torah portion, and that's relevant to that day. But in the end, on Shabbat, the whole thing is lumped together in one big message. That we read the Torah portion from the beginning to the end. Okay, what is the message of this week's Torah reading of Shalach? Okay, we've already talked about what's the topic of this week, what exactly happened, what's the the timeline, what happened over here. What happened? This week's Torah portion, Parshat Shalach, Oseka, deals mostly with one topic, one story. What's the story? The story of the Meraglim, of the scouts. They're also called, the word Meragel also means a spy. So Moses sent 12 scouts, spies, into the land of Israel. The Jewish people are all waiting on the border outside of Israel. And he sends 12 scouts to go and survey the land of Israel. And they take 40 days. They go from top to bottom, inside and out. They look through the whole Eretz Israel, and they come back with big fruits. And the Jewish people say, well, it's one of fruits. And they say, these fruits are really wonderful. That's what's waiting for us. But there's also waiting for us the people who eat these fruits. And they are massive people. And just like they eat the fruits, they're going to eat us. That's only our personal opinion. And everybody said, wow, these guys were there. They saw it. We're not going in. We're not going to let this. Okay, so this week's Torah portion starts with the Shaluach HaMeraglim sending these scouts in the beginning of this week's Torah portion until the second reading of this week's Torah portion, and how the scouts went, and they went on the length and the width of the whole land of Israel, and how they came back to Moshe and said and to all the Jewish people, and gave this negative report. Kol ishtalshlut, all of the all of the continuation of all of the occurrences that happened in this weird, this disappointing story. Ad la'onish, until God got angry and he said, I'm punishing you. That's from the second reading until the fifth reading. Then after that is the parsha of the Nesachim. What's the Nesachim? the wine and the oil libations that they had to bring in the temple, especially the wine. They had to bring wine with each sacrifice. Wine. That's called the Nesachim. When you come to the land of Israel and you make a sacrifice for God, you have to bring wine l'nesach. Excuse me. God explained, first of all, he told them, you're going to go into the land of Israel. Eventually, you're going to go there. Whether you want to or not, you're going to go. And when you go to the land of Israel, the main thing you're going to have there is, just like in the desert, there was the tabernacle. You're going to be there. There's going to be the holy temple. It took them 440 years to build the holy temple, but until they built it. But meanwhile, they were making sacrifices, and in each sacrifice, they brought a libation. And there was different places where there was a tabernacle set up when they came to the land of Israel. Sha'av shechatu, even though the Jewish people sinned, They didn't want to go into the land of Israel. That God made a punishment for them. 40 years they're going to wander in the desert. But nevertheless, God announced to them that they're going to go into the land of Israel. That's the very end of this week's Torah portion. Almost to the very There's one more topic. Sipur Echad Aruch is one big long story that spreads out over many, many sentences and many different parts of the parsha of this week's Torah portion. In order to know this whole idea, as Loma speak, it's not enough just to learn one little part of our Torah reading. You have to read the whole thing from the beginning until the end, and with all of the different parts of it. How Moses sent the spies, how the spies went in, how the spies came back, how they convinced the Jewish people, how Moshe got mad, how God punished them, and then how nevertheless God announced you're going to go into the land of Israel and you're going to bring sacrifices with wine offerings. So this stresses that this week's Torah portion is really one big single topic. One topic. And the main thing is that at the end of this week's Torah parsha Shlach, we've read now what happens. There's 7 readings, right? 7. The Torah reading is divided up into 7 portions. On Shabbat, 7 people are called up, one after the other. So we've talked about 6 of them. 6 of them are talking about the Moses sending in these scouts and how they failed and how God got mad and how God punished them, and God nevertheless promised them that eventually you're going to go to the land of Israel. That's 6. But the 7th, the last reading, is tzitzit. She'imi yoto, that even though tzitzit is an individual commandment, it's one of the 613 commandments. Again, for those of you who might not know, tzitzit are these strings that you tie to your garments. Yeah, this goes, here we go. See, here's the garment. Right? I got the garment, wearing the garment, and here's the garment. And tzitzit are these strings you put in the corner of the garment. 4 corners. There's strings. Can you see them? Anyway, that's what it looks like. Tzitzit. And that's a commandment. If you have a garment, especially if a garment is made of wool, but even if not, a garment, there's specifications. A garment, and the garment is square and it's a certain size, big enough to cover a sufficient part of your body, then you have to put on the corners of this garment, you have to put tzitzit. So that's this commandment that says, what's it got to do with anything? That even though that it's an individual commandment, one of the 613 commandments of the Torah, harihu shekula, but it says that this commandment of tzitzit is equal to all of the other commandments. How one commandment is equal to 612 other commandments? How can it possibly be? Because it says in this commandment, "V'reitem oto," you will see it. You will see this commandment. V'zachartem et kol mitzvot Hashem, and remember all of the commandments of God. Why? How are you going to remember the commandments of God from tzitzit? Because the numerical value of the word tzitzit is 600. Tzadik is 90. Yud is 10. That's 100. Tzadik Yud is 100. Tzadik Yud is another 100. That's 200. And Taf is 400. That's 600. And there's 8 strands. These strands here. So there's 8 of them. Let's see, there's 8. And there's 5 knots. These knots are here. K-N-O-T-S. See? Knots. And the 5, that's another 13. That comes up to the 613 commandments. You look at the tzitzit, reminds you of the 613 commandments, which is like the Torah. That call inyan uparsha, every single topic and every single Torah, the subject in the Torah is attached to relevant to everything else. Just like the tzitzit are tied to the garment, and that each one of these are individual strands, but they're all tied one together. The same thing in the Torah is, even though everything is different and it's separate and it has its own issue and its own message, but nevertheless, it is part of one Torah. But Tzorach Laban, says the Rebbe, we have to understand. Since that all of the matters of the Torah, they are exact, tachlit diuk. Who wrote the Torah? God. Huh? So God makes all these people and all these animals and plants and all of them. If you ever take a little, even a very superficial class in biology, you know the human beings are very, very complicated. And so are animals. They have all these systems with circulatory systems and respiratory systems and reproductive systems. And these are very complicated. And there's a lot of animals. And there's bugs also. And then there's plants. And God creates everything exactly. Once in a while, things don't go right. But 99.99999% of the time, the brain works and the head works, the lungs work. So God is very, very exact. How much more so the Torah? The Torah is the inner will of God. The Torah is also alive. Like a human being, it's alive. It's very complicated, but it's alive and it's exact. Everything in the Torah is exact, ultimately exact. So therefore, Mistaber Lomar, it's logical to say, Shehad Degasha, Inyan Achdut, that stressing this idea of the unity of the Torah in Parshat Shalach, in this week's Torah portion, has to be somehow or other connected with the majority of the Torah portion. Okay, again, what do we see over here? The Torah is a big message. Unity. Unity, e pluribus unum, from many becomes unified, one. That's the message of the Torah. And every detail of the Torah sends this message of unity. God is one. What does it mean, God is one? That all of the details of the world just come to stress God's oneness. They're not separate from God. They come to stress God's oneness. And the Torah is the example of all these little different details, but all showing and indicating clearly a unity. So this week's Torah portion, Shalach, that talk about the Jewish people rebelling against Moses and getting punished, etc., that somehow or other shows on unity. Again, just have to remember, the Torah is written by God himself. God is creating you right now. God is creating me right now, but that you don't feel. God is creating you right now. There is no other God, no other creator. And that God gave the Torah to the whole world through the Jews. So it's stressing the unity of God and the unity of all things, but still, nevertheless, everything is different. So how does this work out? Well, I'll tell you how it works out. Learn this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion explains it. Every Torah portion explains it, but this week's Torah portion also. Unity. Okay, how so? This week's Torah portion talks about the Jews sinning. They did a bad thing. We'll look at it. We'll see. A kesher, number 2. Okay, so it says, number 1, question. How is it that this week's Torah portion about the Jewish people sinning and not one going to Israel, that indicates on God's oneness? Question number 1. Question number 2. Hakesher v'shaychut, what is the connection to the time that we are reading this Torah portion, namely end of the month of Sivan, this month of Sivan, where the main thing of the month of Sivan is, of course, that God gave the Torah. First of all, let's explain what was this idea of sending spies. Why did God want to send these spies? What for? What was the purpose? What did he get out of it? What are we supposed to get out of it? 1 second. Let's just get this one. Give me a minute. 1 second. Yeah. Good. Okay. Okay. First of all, let's explain Why did Moses send these scouts? Whether in this week's Torah portion or in the Haftorah. The Haftorah is a portion of the Torah. Usually it's of the prophets or of the kings. Sometimes it's written. Anyway, there's written a short thing, which is not from the 5 books of Moses. And it usually is the topic of this week's Torah portion. It's on the same topic, the same idea, except once in a while with the holidays. It's not. But generally, it's talking about the topic of the Torah portion. Okay. So the Haftorah, which is the end of this week's Torah portion, that the Haftorah that we read is something like the Parsha. This comes from the book of Joshua, this week's Torah portion. The Haftorah comes from Joshua. Shemasupar, the Haftorah that we read, this after the Torah is read, so a small thing that's read, is talking about how Joshua, he sent spies. He also sent spies. He did the same thing that Moses did. Moses sent 12 spies, and it was a disaster. And this is like 40 years later, 39 years later, he sent also spies, 2 spies, and it was successful. When Joshua sent, there's several details which are different from one the other, which we'll talk about. Okay. So what are we going to learn from this whole business? Moses sent in spies. Why did he send in spies? And Joshua, 40 years later, he also sent in spies. But there's a little bit of a difference between them. What? In the spies that Moshe sent, Shlach Lacha, Rashi explains that you sent the spies. There was sending these spies was Moses's idea. Ladatcha. God said to Moshe, "You want to send in scouts?" Moshe said, "Yeah, I want to send in scouts." He said, "Okay, it's up to you. I'm not commanding you. If you want to send these scouts, then send." Which is not the case. The scouts that Joshua sent, certainly Joshua did not do it from his own initiative. Raksha Hashem Tzivo. It must be that God commanded him to do it. Kamuvan, like it's understood. And from if you read the whole story of Joshua, you didn't even have to say in the Torah. Obviously, God spoke to Joshua. A lot of times we see that he spoke to Joshua. And it must be that if he sent these 2 scouts, he didn't do it because he wanted to. It must be that God told him to do it. That after Kilkulu, that after the tremendous tragedy, the debacle that was as a result of Moses sending the spies. So Joshua, you'd think that he certainly would not send spies on his own. He wouldn't send them on his own. How much more so? So it must be. We have to say that God commanded Joshua to send in these scouts. Okay. So here we have an interesting story. Moshe sent in these scouts, and it was terrible. Came back, convinced the Jewish people not to go in. Joshua, 40 years later, 39 years later, he also sent in scouts. He also sent in scouts. Obviously, God must have told him to do it. But Joshua, he was successful. Joshua only sent in 2 people. Joshua sent only 2 people. And Moses sent 12. So we'll see. In Moshe, it says, Shlach Lecha Anashim. It says, by Moshe, it says, send people. God doesn't say send spies. V'yaturu Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, and it says, and they should scout out the land of Israel. It doesn't say that they should spy out the land of Israel. They should be. He just said, God said, send in people, and they'll just survey the land. That's what he said to Moses. By Joshua, it says, Anashim Raglim, that Joshua sent in specifically spies. Lachfor at the Oretz, in order to undermine the dwellers of the land of Israel. Lachfor et eretz bo. They did it in order to, undermine the, the government and the people that were in the land of Canaan then. So Moses just sent these 12 people just to come back with a report to tell everybody, all the Jewish people, what's going on in the land of Israel. Joshua sent in for purposes of war. Purposes of war. We're going in, we're going to take it over. That's a big difference. Number 3, Baraglim and the spies, that scouts that Moshe sent in, it says, that Joshua, that Moses sent 12 scouts, and they were all anashim, special people. 12, each one was the special person from his tribe. There were 12 tribes in the desert that traveled in the desert, and each one had their special high leader, and they were the ones that went. And by the scouts that Joshua sent in, the spies, it just said Joshua just sent 2 people. It doesn't say that they were special. Joshua just sent 2 regular people. Okay, what are we going to learn from all this? We got a few more. Listen, Amaragli and the scouts, the spies that Moses sent in, they were the leaders of the Jews. Kol Nasibahem, Rosh Ben Israel, they were the heads, and these are even their names. But the scouts that Joshua sent in, it just doesn't say that they were leaders. It doesn't say anything about that. It doesn't even say their names. It doesn't even say who those people were that Joshua sent in. That were sent in. Huh? We're going to see it was Pinchas, Kaleb. Let's see what it says over 27. Like Pinchas and Kaleb. They were the ones that were sent in. But it doesn't say that in the Torah. It just says that Joshua sent in 2 men, 2 spies. And by Moses, it says that Moses sent 12 special people. These are their names. They were the highest of their tribes. They were wonderful. And he just sent them in to survey, not to scout out. 4th question. Hamaraglim, the spies, Hamaraglim, the scouts of Moshe. We did this. This is what you did. This is what we just did. Okay. 5. Shiluach Hamaraglim, when Moses sent his scouts, was in a way, it was pirsum, it was advertised. In Biyachas Bnei Israel, both, it was advertised to the Jewish people. Everybody knew. They went away with a big fanfare. It was Shiyadu Kulam, everybody knew that they were sending out spies. When they came back, it says, Vayeshivu otam Dvar, that all the Jewish people were there to receive their arrival. And even more, that when Moses sent out these scouts, even the inhabitants of the land of Israel knew about it. The Canaanites, Sharia Meraglim, it says that Moses, these Meraglim of Moses, the scouts of Moses, they didn't make any effort to conceal themselves. So that they shouldn't be noticed, or maybe people would be suspicious. Moses sent in 12 scouts, and everyone knew about it. It was advertised about by the Jews, and he didn't even hide it from the non-Jews, from the people in Canaan. By means of this, that each one of them should go alone. But Moses didn't say each person go alone and scout out your part of the land of Israel. They all went together, an open bullet that everyone could see. If Moses would have said, listen, I'm sending 12 scouts in. The land of Israel is going to be divided into 12 parts. 12 parts. I want each one of you to go to your part. I'll show you where it is. In general, maybe it wasn't exactly divided until later on. Later on it was divided. But I want each one of you to go in and scout out your general area. One's going to be near the sea. One's going to be in the mountains. One's going to be near the desert. One's going to be in the south. One's going to be in the north. Everyone go. This is very good. Split up. Everyone split up. God will be with you. You don't have to worry. You'll go out and see your part of the land of Israel, take notes, then come back and meet together. This, first of all, is going to save a lot of time. We don't have everybody has to go to every place, right? We're going to cut the time down by 1 and by 12. Instead of all of the 12 scouts going all together to each place, we're going to have us split it up, and each tribe, their representative, will go to his place. You'll be there for exactly the same amount of time. If all of them were going around together, they were there for 40 days. So 40 days. So let's say in each place there were 3 days, whatever is 3 times 12, 3.25 days. So each place there'll be 3.25 days all together, all 12. Why do it that way? Why do it that way? It said that's each person will spend 3.25 days in his place, and they'll come back. And instead of scouting, taking 40 days to wander around the land of Israel, they'll take only 3.5 days. Every person will see their own part. They'll come back with their notes, and that's it. No, not only that, there's a bigger advantage if they go separately. You won't be noticed. But Moses didn't do that. Moses said, I want all 12 to go to each and every place, stay together. I don't care if you're noticed or not. Makes absolutely no, they all went together, and they went in a way that was advertised. The God had to make a big miracle that no one would notice them. It says, it says every place where we went, the inhabitants were burying their dead. They were funerals so that no one would notice the scouts that Moses sent. Which is not the case, the scouts that Joshua sent. It says, Meraglim Cheresh. It says that he sent in spies secretly. Whether regarding the Jewish people. He didn't let the Jewish people know. Joshua didn't let the Jewish people know he was sending anyone. The Joshua sent them quietly. He didn't want that anyone in the Jewish people would know that he's sending scouts. Joshua. And therefore, when they came back, it says, Vayavo el Yoshua, that the 2 scouts that Joshua sent, they came to him. V'yasapru alone, they told him. No one knew that they went. No one knew that they came back. Exactly the opposite of the 12 scouts that Moses sent. Everyone knew that they went. Even the inhabitants of Canaan knew that they were there. Right? God had to make a special miracle so that they wouldn't be noticed. No one would put it. But those that Joshua sent in, no one knew about it. And there was only 2 of them. And he told them to go quietly, that no one should notice them. So Omer Lahem, he said, Asu imachem ke charashim kadei shelo yastiru divrechem mibenechem. It says that the people in the land of Israel, it says that they won't notice you. You won't try to hide yourselves, but don't worry, no one's going to notice you. They won't put their mind to you. That's true. It says you shouldn't be concealed from them. Dvar, some say, I'm sorry. It says he sent them Cheresh. Joshua sent them. I'm sorry if I made a mistake. Joshua sent them that they should go quietly. He said, make yourself like Chereshim, like you're deaf or whatever. Shelo yastiru divreim mipenechem, so that the non-Jews, that the Canaanites, they won't try to hide themselves from you. So make yourself like you don't notice. The 2 scouts that Joshua sent in, I want you to go in and don't be noticed. And even if you are noticed, make yourself like you're fools or idiots or like you're deaf, so that no one will hide themselves from you. They'll say, oh, these guys, they're not noticing anything we're going to do. Another opinion says that Joshua dressed them up like a pot salesman. Sheyu nirim kekadarim. It seemed that they were just selling things there. Until the time that they had to hide away so that no one will see them. Joshua. So Joshua sent his spies in with specific orders. They should not be noticed. Hide yourself as much as possible. Don't act in any way different from anybody else. Moses, not so. Moses sent them, he said, stick together, everybody. I don't care if you're noticed or not. It makes no difference whatsoever. I want you to know, I want the Jewish people to know. Like it says, Tikach Isha, and eventually the two spies that Joshua sent in, they had to hide themselves. They took the two men, and it says, Rachav, she hid them. The Tomer, she says, Aharon Lachu, said, as soon as the nighttime comes, run as fast as you can, go to hide yourself in the mountains, maybe you'll be noticed. Okay, so we see the spies that Moses sent, that's in this week's Torah portion, and the spies that Joshua sent. Big difference. There's going to be one more. Big differences between them. The main differences is Moses sent 12 and told them, don't worry about being noticed. Moshe advertised it to all the Jewish people. Everyone knew they were going. Everyone received them when they came back. Everyone knew their names. They were important people. Not so Joshua. Joshua sent only 2 people. It doesn't even say what their names were. And he told them to keep quiet. And he didn't advertise it to the Jewish people. And for sure he didn't want the Canaanites to know about it. Well, what are we going to learn from all this? We're going to see. It says that the scouts, here's the last difference. The scouts that Moshe sent, they covered every inch of the land of Israel. Arba meot parsa al arba meot parsa. It says 400 parsas by 400 parsa. It took them 40 days. They went to the length and the width of Israel. But the spies, the scouts, the spies that Joshua sent, even though they were commanded, Lachu, go and see the land of Israel and also Jericho. But in fact, what did they do? How much time were the spies of Joshua actually in the land of Israel? Joshua told them, see the whole land and Jericho, not just Jericho alone. Jericho was like the entering point. Nevertheless, not only that they went, that all they did, in fact, the scouts, the spies of Joshua, they stayed, a day, 2 days. They went only into the city of Jericho. And even that, they didn't really go in that much. They just were in the walls of Jericho. For sure, they didn't go anywhere else in Israel. Even more, even in Jericho itself, they didn't even scout out the whole city of Jericho. On that same night that they reached the house of Rachav, Rachav let them out through the window and through the wall. Jericho was on the wall of Israel. That was the border of Israel. He let them out. She said, immediately run to the mountains. She said, sit there 3 days because people are running after you. So what happened? Moses sent in 12 spies, famous people. Everybody knew about it. He didn't try to hide them from anyone. They stayed for 40 days in the land of Israel. They all walked all together and they scouted the whole entire land. Joshua sent in 2 scouts. We don't even know their name. We know their names, but their names are not written. 2 scouts in secret. They came back in secret. And how long did they actually scout out the land of Israel? Well, first of all, they didn't scout out the land of Israel, just the city of Jericho. And even in Jericho, all they did was just get to the outskirts of the wall. And they were only there for a few hours. Immediately, they came back to Joshua. That was the end of their... If so, and they succeeded. And Moses didn't succeed. Why? What's going on over here? And what can we learn from this? This and much more, we're going to find out tomorrow.